Every story has a hidden truth, a side no one talks about. And sometimes that truth changes everything you thought you knew. Today's story is one of those. But before we dive in, I'm curious, where are you watching from right now? Let me know in the comments. All right, let's begin. They say a mother's love is a sanctuary, a place where you're always safe, no matter how cold the world gets. For 26 years, I believed that lie. I believed it while I worked double shifts, while my feet ached and my hands were burned by steaming plates of pasta, and while I tucked every spare dollar into a tattered envelope hidden beneath my mattress. I believed it because I had to. If I didn't have her, who did I have? But standing in that courtroom, under the flickering hum of the fluorescent lights, I finally saw the woman who had raised me. She wasn't a sanctuary. She was a predator in a designer suit. "Your Honor," my mother said, her voice dripping with a practiced honey-sweet sorrow that made my skin crawl. "My daughter is, well, she's just a waitress. She lives paycheck to paycheck in a cramped studio. She can't even manage her own life, let alone the inheritance my late husband intended for a responsible heir. She's unstable. She's struggling. And frankly, she's desperate." I sat at the wooden table, my fingers digging into the palms of my hands until I felt the sting of my own nails. The courtroom felt like it was closing in on me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't just trying to take the money my father had left for me. She was trying to take my dignity. She wanted the world to see me the way she saw me, as something small, something disposable, something that only existed to serve. Just a waitress. Those words echoed in the silence of the room. The judge, a stern woman with eyes that seemed to see through every facade, looked down at me. "Does the defendant have anything to say regarding these claims of financial instability?" I felt the eyes of the room on me. My mother's lawyer smirked. My mother herself didn't even look at me. She was too busy dabbing a non-existent tear from her eye with a silk handkerchief. She thought she had won. She thought the girl who spent 12 hours a day carrying trays didn't have the resources, the wit, or the strength to fight back. But what she didn't know that day, what she couldn't possibly have imagined, was that while she was busy spending my father's life insurance on luxury galas and keeping up appearances, I had been building a world she wasn't invited to. I wasn't just a waitress. I was a shadow. And it was finally time for that shadow to step into the light. To understand how we got to that courtroom, you have to understand the life I lived before the veil was torn away. My father was the heartbeat of our home. He was a man of dirt under the fingernails work and quiet wisdom. When he passed away 3 years ago, the light in our house didn't just dim, it went out entirely. My mother, Eleanor, didn't grieve like a normal person. She grieved like a woman who had lost her primary source of funding. Within months, the house was filled with expensive new furniture we couldn't afford, and she was talking about investments that sounded more like gambling. "Grace, darling," she'd say, looking at my uniform with a disgusted curl of her lip, "you really should find a husband with a bit of pedigree. This little job of yours is embarrassing." What do I tell my friends at the club? That my daughter clears breadcrumbs for a living? It hurt. Every time she said it, a little piece of my heart withered. But I stayed. I helped her with the bills. I gave her half of my tips every week because she claimed the estate was tied up in probate. I believed her because I loved her. I thought we were a team. Until the day I found the ledger. I was cleaning out the attic, looking for some old photo albums of my father, when I found a locked briefcase. Inside wasn't just the estate paperwork, it was the truth. My father hadn't just left me a small trust that Eleanor controlled. He had left me the entire commercial property portfolio he'd built over 40 years. He had left me the keys to a kingdom, and Eleanor had spent 3 years forging my signature on documents to keep me in the dark, using the income to fund her lavish lifestyle while I worked for tips to keep the lights on. I felt shattered. I sat on the dusty floor of that attic and cried until I couldn't breathe. My own mother had turned me into her personal servant while she lived off my birthright. But as the grief turned into a cold, hard knot of resolve, I realized something. If she thought I was just a waitress, I would play the part. I would be the best waitress she'd ever seen. For the next year, I lived a double life. By day, I wore the apron. I smiled at rude customers. I took the bus. I let my mother complain about my lack of ambition. But by night, I was meeting with private investigators. I was talking to my father's old business partners in secret. I was learning the language of contracts and percentages. I discovered that Eleanor wasn't just spending the money, she was drowning. She had taken out massive predatory loans against the properties, thinking she could flip them for a profit. She was hemorrhaging cash. The only way she could save herself was to have me declared legally incompetent or unstable, so she could gain full, permanent power of attorney over the remaining assets. Assets she didn't know I had already quietly begun to protect. She filed the suit. She told the family friends I was having a breakdown. She told the court I was a high-risk individual who couldn't be trusted with a dime. The day of the hearing, she arrived in a chauffeured car. I arrived on the city bus, wearing my work uniform under a cheap coat. I wanted her to feel confident. I wanted her to feel so superior that she became careless. "Grace is a sweet girl," Eleanor told the judge, her voice trembling with that fake emotion. "But she's settled for a life of mediocrity. She has no savings. She has no assets. She refuses to seek better employment. She is simply not capable of managing the complexity of her father's legacy. It would be a mercy to relieve her of that burden." My lawyer, a quiet man I'd paid for, with a year's worth of saved tips and a secret loan from my father's most loyal friend, stood up. "Your Honor, if I may," he said calmly, "the petitioner claims my client has no assets. She claims my client is a simple waitress with no financial literacy. We would like to submit Exhibit D into the record." Eleanor leaned back, whispering something to her lawyer. They were both smiling. "Exhibit D," my lawyer continued, "is a certified deed and a series of corporate filings." While the petitioner was busy managing the day-to-day of the estate, she failed to notice that 3 of the primary commercial holdings were sold 6 months ago due to tax liens she ignored. Eleanor's smile faltered. "What? That's impossible. I have those properties." "Actually," my lawyer said, turning to look directly at her, "you had the debt. The properties were purchased at auction by an anonymous LLC, an LLC owned entirely by Grace." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I looked at my mother. For the first time in years, she looked small. "Not only did Grace purchase the properties back from the brink of foreclosure," my lawyer added, "but she has been documenting every cent of the estate's income that was diverted into your personal accounts over the last 3 years. We have the forensic audit right here. It's not a question of Grace's competence, Your Honor. It's a question of the petitioner's embezzlement." The color drained from Eleanor's face. She turned a ghostly shade of gray. "Grace? What have you done?" I stood up then. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to be dramatic, I just spoke the truth. "I did what you taught me, Mom. I worked hard. I paid attention. And I didn't let anyone see what I was really doing." The fallout was swift. The judge didn't just dismiss the case, she referred the audit to the district attorney. Because I had proven that Eleanor had been forging my signature and mismanaging the estate, her control was stripped away instantly. Justice isn't always a loud explosion. Sometimes it's just the sound of a gavel hitting a block of wood. Eleanor lost the house. She lost the designer clothes. She lost the friends who only loved her for the parties she threw with my money. She ended up in a small, 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place she used to mock me for living in. I remember the last time I saw her. I went to her apartment to drop off some of her personal belongings that had been left in the attic. She looked older, her hair unkempt, the pedigree she obsessed over gone like smoke in the wind. "You ruined me," she hissed, looking at me through the cracked doorway. after everything I did for you." "You didn't do anything for me, Mom," I said softly. "You did everything for yourself. You just used me as the backdrop." I walked away that day and I didn't look back. I realized that my revenge wasn't about making her suffer, though she was certainly reaping what she had sown. My revenge was simply being the woman she said I could never be. Today, I still go to the restaurant sometimes. Not to work, I sold my father's properties for a massive profit and started a foundation for young women entering the workforce. No, I go there to eat. I sit at a table, I order a coffee, and I make sure to leave a massive tip for the girl in the apron. I look at her, and I see the strength she doesn't know she has yet. I see the tired eyes and the fast hands, and I know that she is capable of moving mountains. People ask me if I'm sad about losing my mother, and I tell them the truth. I didn't lose a mother. I lost a weight that was holding me underwater. I finally learned how to breathe. Because I'm not just a waitress, I am the architect of my own life, and the view from the top is much better than she ever told me it would be.